saw a housekeeper's rough hands and denied her brilliant daughter. But his cruel rejection was a fatal mistake. Now, he's about to learn who she really is. 14-year-old Emily Hayes. The scholarship interview was a new beginning. Her grades were flawless. Her mother, Susan, a housekeeper, had ironed her best, faded dress. But the principal of Crestwood Academy didn't see the student. He saw the mother's red, chapped hands. He called her job domestic services and dismissed the child. She wouldn't fit in. He lied, claiming the scholarship fund was depleted. He judged the brilliant girl by her mother's humble work. But the principal, secure in his grand office, made one critical error. He never thought to ask who her father was. And by the way, I'd love to know where you're joining from today. Leave a comment below. I hope you enjoy the story. A small, hopeful hand pushed open an oak door far too heavy for its size. 10-year-old Emily Hayes clutched her mother's hand, her heart beating like a sparrow's wing. This was the day her new life was supposed to begin at the prestigious Crestwood Academy. The morning had started before sunrise in their small, clean apartment. Emily had laid out her best dress, the blue one with the small white flowers. It was 2 years old, but her mother, Susan, had ironed it perfectly. Emily's own blonde hair was pulled back in a neat, tight braid. "Are you sure I look okay, Mama?" Emily had asked, spinning in the small kitchen. Susan Hayes kneeled, smoothing the dress over her daughter's knees. Susan's hands were rough, the knuckles red from years of scrubbing and cleaning other people's homes. But her touch was always gentle. "You look beautiful, Emmy," Susan said, her voice soft with pride. "More importantly, you look smart. And you are smart. You earned this." Emily nodded, though a small knot of worry tightened in her stomach. She knew her mother worked hard. She knew Crestwood was a school for children whose mothers did not clean houses. But the scholarship was for her grades. Her grades were the best in her entire school. That had to be enough. They took 2 buses to reach the part of town where Crestwood was. The houses grew larger and larger, set back from the road behind stone fences and iron gates. Finally, they stood before the academy itself. It looked less like a school and more like a castle from one of Emily's storybooks. It was built of dark gray stone, covered in ivy. "Wow," Emily whispered, tilting her head back. "Deep breath," Susan said, squeezing her hand. "Remember what I told you. Look the principal right in the eye and be yourself. He will love you." Now, standing inside, Emily wasn't so sure. The main office was silent. A thick, dark red carpet swallowed the sound of their footsteps. The air smelled of lemon polish and old, important books. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, landing on paintings of serious-looking men in dark suits. Emily thought they looked much fancier than the paintings in the houses her mother cleaned. A woman sat behind a large, gleaming wooden desk. She had kind eyes and a soft, slightly tired smile. "Hello, dear. You must be Emily Hayes. I'm Miss Janice, the school secretary." "Yes, ma'am," Emily said politely. "We're here to see Principal Cole," Susan added, her voice quiet but clear. "Of course. He's expecting you. You can go right in," Miss Janice said, gesturing to another heavy door. Emily's hand was slick with sweat as her mother held it. Susan knocked softly. "Enter," a sharp voice called. Principal Alan Cole's office was even grander than the hallway. The desk was so large, it looked like a wall of dark wood. Behind it sat the principal, a man who seemed as severe and polished as the furniture. His graying hair was cut short and perfect, not a single strand out of place. He wore a crisp gray suit and a polished gold tie clip. He was writing something and did not look up for a full minute. Emily and Susan stood silently, feeling small in the tall, echoey room. Finally, Mr. Cole placed his pen down with a small click. He looked at them, but his eyes were cold. "Mrs. Hayes. And this is Emily." "Good morning, Principal Cole," Susan said, trying to sound brave. "We are so excited to be here." "Yes," Mr. Cole said slowly. His eyes moved over them. He looked at Susan's simple blouse. He looked at Emily's slightly faded dress. His gaze lingered for a moment on Susan's red, chapped hands. Emily felt a flush of shame she didn't understand. She instinctively put her own hands behind her back. "Please sit," Mr. Cole said, gesturing to 2 hardback chairs. They felt very far from his desk. Mr. Cole opened a file folder. Emily could see her own name on the tab. "Hayes, Emily. I have your daughter's file here," Mr. Cole began. His voice was smooth, but it had no warmth. The academic record is impressive. Very high test scores. She works so hard, Susan said, a proud smile touching her lips. She reads constantly. Her teachers all say she's the brightest student they've ever had. So I see, Mr. Cole said. He turned a page. His expression tightened, just slightly. Emily watched his eyes scan a different part of the paper. I see here your address is on Elmwood Street. Yes, sir, Susan replied. It's a small apartment, but And your occupation, Mrs. Hayes. Domestic services? The way he said the words made them sound dirty. I'm a housekeeper, Susan said, her chin lifting. I clean for several families in the West Hills neighborhood. I see. Mr. Cole closed the folder. The sound was soft, but it felt final. Mrs. Hayes, Crestwood Academy, is one of the top preparatory schools in the nation. Our students go on to Ivy League universities. Our standards are exacting. Emily can meet them, Susan said quickly. I know she can. She just needs the chance. It is not just about academics, Mrs. Hayes, the principal said. He steepled his fingers, his polished cufflink glinting. It is about fit. Our families are deeply involved in the Crestwood community. There are fundraisers, benefits, galas. The financial and social commitments are substantial. The application was for the Founders Merit Scholarship, Susan said, her voice becoming tighter. It said it was a full scholarship. It said it was based on grades. Ah, the scholarship. Mr. Cole gave a small, sad-looking sigh. Unfortunately, there has been a development. The scholarship fund is depleted for this year. We had an unexpected number of applicants. Emily watched the color drain from her mother's face. Depleted? Susan repeated. But, we were told. The letter said she was a finalist. It said to come today for the interview. That was a formality, Mr. Cole said, waving a dismissive hand. A clerical error. The funds are simply not available. Without the scholarship, the annual tuition is $40,000. Emily gasped. She didn't know how much money that was, but she knew from her mother's face that it was impossible. It was more than all the money in the world. I don't understand, Susan stammered. Mr. Cole's expression shifted. The false politeness was gone. Now, there was only impatience. Mrs. Hayes, your daughter is clearly a bright girl, but she will not be attending Crestwood. Is there any other way? Susan asked, her voice trembling. A payment plan? I can work more. I can. That will not be necessary. Mr. Cole cut in, his voice sharp as glass. This environment, it would be too much for her. She would feel out of place. The other children, they come from different backgrounds. Different from what? Susan asked, and now her sadness was turning into anger. From a housekeeper's background, Mr. Cole said plainly. She would be better served at the public school in your district. It would be a more comfortable fit. The principal stood up. The meeting was over. Emily felt a tear slide down her cheek. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood the feeling. She understood no. She understood the way Mr. Cole looked at her mother. Susan stood slowly. She took Emily's hand. Her own hand was shaking, but her grip was firm. She looked directly at Principal Cole, her back straight. You've judged my daughter based on my job, Susan said, her voice low and shaking with fury. You've judged her based on where we live. You never even asked her a single question. I have made my decision, Mrs. Hayes, the principal said, turning his back to them. He looked out his large window at the perfect green lawns. Miss Janice will show you out. Susan turned and walked, pulling Emily with her. Emily looked back one last time, but the principal was still admiring the view. They walked through the silent, polished office. Miss Janice, the secretary, was watching them. Her face was full of pity. As Emily passed the desk, Miss Janice quickly and quietly slipped something into her hand. Emily looked down. It was a shiny red apple. You keep your chin up, sweetie, Miss Janice whispered, so low only Emily could hear. You're a star. Then the heavy oak door closed behind them, shutting them out. They stood on the stone steps of the great school. The bright, sunny day suddenly felt cold. Emily looked up at her mother. Susan's face was pale, but her eyes were burning. She was trying very hard not to cry. Mama, Emily whispered. Why did he hate us? Susan finally let out a long, shuddering breath. She sank onto the bottom step and pulled Emily into a tight hug. Oh, baby, he doesn't hate us, Susan whispered into her daughter's hair. He doesn't know us. He's a small man, Emmy. A small, cruel man who lives in a big, fancy building. But the scholarship. He lied, honey. I don't know why, but he lied. Emily held on to her mother, her face buried in Susan's shoulder. The blue dress didn't feel so special anymore. The castle was just a cold, gray box. I wanted to go there, Mama, Emily cried softly. I know, Susan said, stroking her hair. I know. They sat there for a long time. They had to wait 45 minutes for the next bus. The ride home was long and silent. They passed the big houses with their iron gates, and then the smaller houses, and then the rows of apartments. When they got back to their own apartment, it felt tiny, but it was warm, and it smelled like cinnamon from the breakfast Susan had made. Emily went to her room. She had a small desk by the window. On the wall, she had taped all her papers from school. Every single one had a gold star or a perfect A at the top. She looked at them, and they seemed worthless. She sat on her bed, holding the red apple Miss Janice had given her. It was the only good thing that had happened all day. In the kitchen, Susan made 2 cups of tea, even though it was the middle of the day. Her hands were still shaking. She felt humiliated. But beneath the humiliation, a hard, cold anger was forming. It wasn't just for herself. It was for Emily. Her daughter, who was so bright and good, had been dismissed. Dismissed because her mother scrubbed floors. Susan looked at the wall by their small dining table. It was a space she called Daddy's wall. It was covered in photographs. A young, smiling man in a crisp army uniform. The same man holding a baby Emily. The same man standing with other soldiers in a sandy place, all of them smiling. Next to the photos were other items, framed in shadow boxes. There was a neatly folded American flag. There was a Purple Heart. There was a Distinguished Service Cross. And above them all, a single photo of her husband, Colonel Michael Hayes, taken just before his last deployment. He was not dead, but sometimes he felt just as far away. He was stationed in Washington, D.C., working a high-level job at the Pentagon. His work was quiet, serious, and vital. They had decided together that Emily should have a stable life, not the life of an army child, moving every year. So Susan and Emily stayed here, and Michael visited when he could. He sent most of his paycheck home. But Susan had wanted to do this on her own. She worked as a housekeeper by choice. She wanted to contribute. She wanted to show her daughter the value of hard work. She never, ever felt ashamed of it. Until today. Today, her hard work had been used as a weapon against her child. She looked at the phone on the wall. Michael was a busy man. He was in important meetings, protecting the country. She hated to bother him with this. It felt small compared to his world. But then she thought of Emily's face. She thought of Principal Cole's cold eyes. She thought of the lie. The fund is depleted. This wasn't just a rejection. It was an injustice. Susan picked up the phone. She dialed the number she knew by heart. It rang 3 times, and a professional voice answered. Office of the Joint Staff. How may I direct your call? Hello, Susan said, her voice stronger now. This is Susan Hayes. I need to speak to Colonel Michael Hayes. It's a family emergency. It took 3 long minutes. Susan stood twisting the phone cord around her fingers. She looked at the photo of Michael in his dress uniform. He looked so strong, so sure. What would he think of her, crying over a rude man in a fancy office? This was not a war. This was not a national threat. Emily was safe. They were safe. Maybe this wasn't an emergency at all. Maybe she was being foolish. She was just about to hang up when the line clicked. Susan. Her husband's voice was deep and calm, but sharp. It was the voice he used when he was worried, when he was pulled from important work. Michael? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to call you at work. Is Emily okay? Are you hurt? His questions were fast. His priorities were clear. We're fine. We're safe, Susan said quickly, tears welling up again. It's not like that. It's the school. Michael went silent for a beat. He was processing. Crestwood? The interview. What happened? Susan took a shaky breath. She explained the whole morning. She told him about the beautiful building and the secretary, Miss Janice. And then she told him about Principal Cole. He didn't ask her any questions, Michael. He just looked at us. He asked me about my job. Your job? Michael asked. He called it domestic services. And then he said the scholarship was gone. Depleted, he said. He said it was a clerical error. That doesn't sound right, Michael said. His voice had lost its worried husband tone. It now had the cold, quiet edge of Colonel Hayes. It wasn't right, Susan whispered, her anger returning. I knew he was lying. He said she wouldn't fit in. He said she'd be more comfortable at the public school. He dismissed her, Michael. He dismissed our daughter because I clean houses. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. It stretched for 10 seconds. Susan could picture her husband's face. He would not be red with anger. He would be pale, his jaw set. What is the man's name? Michael asked. His voice was perfectly level. Cole. Principal Alan Cole. Alan Cole. Crestwood Academy. Michael repeated the names slowly, as if engraving them in his mind. Susan, you did exactly the right thing by calling me. This is not acceptable. I see her face, Susan said, starting to sob. She tried so hard, Michael. She's so smart. And he broke her heart. He won't, Michael said. It was a promise. Listen to me. This is not a small thing. You are the finest woman I know. And Emily is the best of both of us. There is no place on this earth where she does not fit in. Do you understand me? Yes, Susan whispered. I have to make some calls. This is not over. You comfort our daughter. Tell her Daddy is very proud of her. Tell her she earned that spot, and I will not let a small-minded bully take it from her. Are you coming home? She asked. Not yet. It's better if I handle this from here first. But I will call you tonight. I love you. I love you too. She hung up the phone. She felt better. She wasn't alone in this. But she also felt a new kind of dread. Michael was a man who solved problems. When he focused on a problem, the problem usually regretted it. Emily was in her small bedroom. She had heard her mother's side of the conversation. She heard Daddy. She heard emergency. She heard her mother crying. A cold stone of guilt settled in her stomach. She knew her father's job was a secret. She knew it was about protecting the country. She pictured him in a dark room full of maps and important men. And now, her mother had called him, crying. All because Emily wasn't good enough for the fancy school. She had failed. And now her failure was so big, it had become a family emergency. She had bothered her father. She had made her mother sad. The papers on her wall seemed to mock her. Susan came into the room, her eyes a little red, but her face set with new strength. She sat on the edge of Emily's bed. Hey, sweetie, Susan said softly. I heard you talking to Daddy, Emily said, her voice small. She wouldn't look at her mother. She just stared at the red apple in her hands. I did. I told him what happened. Is he mad? Emily whispered. Is it an emergency because of me? Because I failed. Susan's heart broke all over again. She pulled her daughter into a tight hug. Oh, Emmy. No. Listen to me. You did not fail. You are perfect. You are brilliant. That man, Principal Cole, he failed. He failed his job. But why did he say no? Because he's a fool, Susan said simply. He's a man who can only see money. He can't see what's really important. He can't see heart. And he can't see smarts. And you have more of both than he will ever know. Emily looked up. What did Daddy say? He said he's very, very proud of you. And he said you earned that spot. And he's going to make a few calls to see if he can fix it. Can he? Emily asked. Your father, Susan said, with a small, proud smile, can do just about anything he sets his mind to. They ate a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches. It was quiet. The small apartment felt safe, but the big, unkind world outside felt very close. That night, Emily had trouble sleeping. She kept thinking about Mr. Cole's cold eyes. She kept thinking about the word housekeeper and why it sounded like a bad word in his mouth. Late that afternoon, in his grand office at Crestwood, Principal Alan Cole was feeling very pleased with himself. He tidied the files on his desk. The Hayes file was already in the rejected pile for Ms. Janice to process. He had solved a difficult problem. The girl was bright, yes, but she would have been a problem. She would have needed clothing allowances. She would have felt poor at the charity balls. He told himself he had saved her from a worse fate. It was a kindness, really. More importantly, he had saved the scholarship slot. He buzzed his secretary. Ms. Janice, please come in. Ms. Janice entered, her notepad ready. Her kind eyes looked tired. Mr. Cole, Janice, that founder's scholarship slot. I have excellent news. I'm going to award it to Jessica Harrington. Ms. Janice paused. The Harringtons, sir? But their daughter's scores were average. Jessica is a fine girl, Mr. Cole said stiffly. And her family understands the importance of community giving. Her father and I spoke just last week. He's very interested in funding our new gymnasium. This scholarship will show him we are invested in his family. So, you're giving the scholarship to the daughter of the man who is funding the new gym? Janice asked, her voice carefully neutral. It's called development, Janice. It's how schools like this function, Mr. Cole said, annoyed. Please call Mr. Harrington. Tell him I have good news for him. He'll be delighted. And what should I tell the other scholarship finalists? Tell them the fund was depleted. It's a simple, clean explanation. No one gets hurt. Mr. Cole smiled, satisfied. That will be all. Janice looked at him for a long moment. She saw a small, greedy man, protected by a very large, expensive desk. Yes, Mr. Cole. Right away. She returned to her own desk. She looked at the phone. The thought of calling the Harringtons made her feel ill. She thought of that little blonde girl's hopeful face. She thought of her poor mother's red hands. Janice had worked here for 20 years. She loved the school, but she did not always love the people who ran it. Before she could make the call, her own line rang. She picked it up with her usual professional greeting. Crestwood Academy, this is Ms. Janice. A man's voice, polite but firm as iron, spoke. Good afternoon. I need to speak with Principal Alan Cole, please. Of course, sir. May I ask who is calling? This is General Peterson. I'm calling from the Pentagon, on behalf of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Janice sat up straight. Her pen clattered onto the desk. The Pentagon? The Joint Chiefs? This was far above the usual parent phone call. One moment, General, she said, her hand shaking just slightly. She pressed the intercom button for the principal's office. Mr. Cole, I'm busy, Janice, his voice snapped. Sir, I apologize, Janice said, her voice formal and stressed. But I have a General Peterson on the line for you. He says he is calling from the Pentagon. There was a pause. Mr. Cole's annoyance vanished, replaced by a sudden rush of interest. The Pentagon. This must be about a new, high-profile family. Maybe a senator's son or a general's daughter. This was exactly the kind of student he wanted. Well, don't keep him waiting, Janice. Mr. Cole's voice was suddenly smooth as silk. Put him through immediately. Janice clicked the button, connecting the call. She leaned back, her heart pounding. She had no idea what was happening, but a strange feeling was settling over her. She looked at the phone number for the Harrington family. She decided to wait a little while before making that call. Inside his office, Principal Cole straightened his tie and smoothed his suit jacket. He took a sip of water. He wanted his voice to be strong and impressive. This was an opportunity. He picked up the receiver. Alan Cole speaking. Mr. Cole, the voice on the other end said. It was deep, crisp, and carried an authority that Cole had never heard before. It was not a voice that requested. It was a voice that commanded. This is General Mark Peterson. I'm calling from the office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General, Cole said, his voice instantly becoming warm and respectful. What an honor. How can Crestwood Academy be of service to you and our armed forces? I'm calling about a specific administrative matter, the general said. He did not return the pleasantries. It concerns your founder's merit scholarship. Cole's stomach did a small flip. He thought of the Harrington family. Did they have a military connection he didn't know about? Of course, General, Cole said, trying to sound helpful. It's our most prestigious award for incoming students. We've just completed our selection process. So we understand, the general said. We also understand that a finalist for that scholarship, a child with a perfect academic record, was informed this morning that the scholarship fund was, quote, depleted. Can you confirm this? Cole began to feel a cold trickle of sweat. This was not about the Harringtons. Well, yes, General, Cole stammered, his professional smoothness cracking. We had an unexpected number of qualified applicants. It was a very difficult decision. A simple administrative issue, I assure you. A clerical error, I believe was the term used, the general said. His voice was like ice. Mr. Cole, the child in question is Emily Hayes. Cole's blood ran cold. He gripped the phone receiver so hard his knuckles turned white. Hayes, the housekeeper's daughter. How could this be? Emily Hayes. Cole repeated, trying to sound confused, as if he barely remembered the name. Do not waste my time, Mr. Cole. Emily Hayes, 10 years old, blonde hair, applicant for the Founder's Scholarship, daughter of Susan Hayes. The general paused, and the next words were spoken with slow, deliberate weight. And daughter of Colonel Michael Hayes. Cole stopped breathing. Colonel? I was not aware of a military connection, Cole managed to say. That is precisely the problem, General Peterson said. You were not aware. You were not aware that Colonel Hayes is one of the most decorated strategic officers in the United States Army. You were not aware that he is currently serving in a vital, high-level capacity at the Pentagon. And you were not aware that the U.S. military takes a very, very dim view of its service members' families being treated with prejudice. Prejudice, Cole yelped, his voice high and thin. I assure you, General, there was no. It was purely a financial matter. The scholarship fund. The scholarship fund, the general cut in, his voice dangerously quiet, which you told Mrs. Hayes was depleted. And yet, our information indicates that just this afternoon, you awarded that same scholarship to a Miss Jessica Harrington. Cole felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. How could they know that? Furthermore, the general continued, his voice relentless. Our information suggests Miss Harrington's father is a potential donor for a new athletic facility, and that Miss Harrington's academic record is average, not in the same league as the daughter of a national hero, a man who, I will remind you, took a bullet in Kandahar so that men like you could sit in nice, safe offices and manage scholarship funds. Cole was trembling. He was completely exposed. This was not a clerical error. This was a scandal. General, I seem to have been misinformed, Cole sputtered. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. My finance department must have. You are the finance department, Mr. Cole, the general stated. You are the principal, and you are the one who will fix this. Colonel Hayes and his wife did not ask for special treatment. They only asked for what their daughter earned. A fair chance. You denied her that. You did so based on her mother's simple, honest work. I can. I will look into it immediately. You will do more than look into it, General Peterson commanded. You will rectify this clerical error. You will call Mrs. Hayes. You will apologize to her. And you will give Emily Hayes the full scholarship she earned. Am I understood? Yes, General. Perfectly. I expect to receive a call from Colonel Hayes by 0900 tomorrow, confirming that this has been done. The general paused. And Mr. Cole, this kind of misunderstanding, it reflects very badly on the leadership of an institution. Very badly indeed. Good day. The line clicked. Alan Cole sat at his desk. He was shaking. His crisp gray suit felt damp with sweat. He looked at the phone as if it were a snake. He had insulted a housekeeper, and he had brought the full weight of the United States military down on his own head. He looked at the phone number for Mr. Harrington. The call he was about to make to his prize donor had just become a nightmare. Outside the principal's office, Miss Janice had not heard the words. She had only heard Mr. Cole's voice. She had heard his smooth, confident tone turn into a high-pitched, panicked squeak. She had heard the words, "Yes, General." When the intercom finally buzzed, it was a weak, rattling sound. Janice. Yes, Mr. Cole. Get me the file for Jessica Harrington. And get me the file for Emily Hayes. Now. Yes, sir, Janice said. She stood up, a small, secret smile on her face. She went to the rejected pile and pulled out Emily's file. 200 miles away, in a quiet, secure office in Washington, D.C., Colonel Michael Hayes hung up the phone. He was not in uniform. He was in a simple black polo shirt and slacks, the required attire for his plainclothes assignment at the Pentagon. He stared at the photo of Susan and Emily on his desk. His door opened, and a large man in a full dress uniform, stars on his shoulders, walked in. It was General Peterson. He was not a cold man. He was, in fact, Michael's oldest friend and mentor. Well, General Peterson asked, his voice now warm and rumbling. He folded, Michael said, a muscle in his jaw tight. He'll make it right. I should hope so, the general grumbled. A man who insults an honest day's work. I've got no patience for it. And to do it to your family, Mike, after all you've. It's done, Mark, Michael said, cutting him off gently. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted it fixed. I appreciate the call. I owe you. You owe me nothing, the general said. It's the least we can do. You take care of this country. We take care of your family. That's the deal. Now, about that briefing for the secretary. Michael nodded, his mind already shifting back to maps and national security. But for a moment, his thoughts stayed on a small apartment on Elmwood Street. That evening, the phone rang in the Hayes apartment. Emily, who was doing her homework at the small dining table, jumped. Susan went to answer it, her hand hesitating. Hello, it's me. Michael's voice came through the line, calm and steady. Michael, did you find anything? I did, he said. I made a few inquiries. It seems there was a significant clerical error, just as we thought. What does that mean? Susan asked, gripping the phone. It means that Principal Cole will be re-evaluating his decision. I have a strong feeling you're going to get another call from the school, probably tomorrow morning. Are you sure? Susan whispered, not daring to hope. I am sure, Michael said. You just be ready to accept his apology. He's going to apologize? I believe he will be, highly motivated to do so, Michael said. How's Emmy? Susan looked over at her daughter. Emily was watching her, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. She's right here. She's a rock, Michael, just like her father. You're the rock, Susan, he said softly. I'll call this weekend. I love you both. We love you. Be safe. Susan hung up and turned to Emily. That was Daddy. Is it fixed? Emily asked. Susan pulled her daughter in for a hug. He thinks so, honey. He thinks that mean man made a big mistake, and he's about to find out just how big it was. The next morning, Alan Cole arrived at Crestwood Academy before the sun was up. He had not slept. He looked pale and rumpled. His first call was to Mr. Harrington. It was a disaster. What do you mean, mistake? Harrington boomed over the phone. You told me Jessica was in. You gave me your word. I know. Robert, I know. Cole said, wiping his face with a handkerchief. But there's been a review. The board of trustees stepped in. They felt the primary scholarship. It had to go to another candidate. A hardship case. A hardship case? You told me it was depleted. You're a liar, Cole. We can still find a place for Jessica. Not at your school. You won't. Harrington roared. And you can forget about the gymnasium. I'm pulling my support. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. The line went dead. Alan Cole sat at his desk, his head in his hands. In 12 hours, he had been humiliated by a general, lost $1 million donation, and now he had to make the most humiliating call of all. He found the number for Susan Hayes. He dialed it, his hands shaking. The phone rang, splitting the quiet morning in the Hayes apartment. Susan and Emily were at the kitchen table. Emily was just moving cereal around in her bowl. She had not wanted to eat. Susan was drinking coffee, her stomach in knots. They both stared at the phone. It rang a second time. It might be him, Susan said, her voice barely a whisper. She stood and walked to the phone, wiping her damp palms on her jeans. She took a deep breath and picked it up. Hello? This is Susan Hayes. A man's voice cleared his throat. It was a weak, strangled sound. Mrs. Hayes. This is Principal Alan Cole from Crestwood Academy. Susan stood up straight. She held the phone tightly. She said nothing. She let the silence stretch. I'm calling about our meeting yesterday, he stammered. Regarding your daughter, Emily. I remember the meeting, Susan said. Her voice was calm and cold. Yes. Well, it appears, Mrs. Hayes, that I was operating with some incorrect information. There has been a significant clerical error. Susan almost laughed at the words. Clerical error. The exact phrase Michael had used. Oh, Susan said. What kind of error was that, Mr. Cole? It's a financial matter. Very dull. The numbers, they were wrong. It seems the Founders Scholarship Fund is not depleted after all. It's quite healthy. He was speaking quickly, rushing the words out. I see, Susan said. And in light of this new information, he continued, and after reviewing Emily's file again, her truly exceptional file, I am delighted to officially offer her the Founders Merit Scholarship. With our deepest apologies for the mix-up, the confusion. He was apologizing to her. The man who had looked at her hands with disgust. The man who had dismissed her daughter with a wave. Susan felt a fierce, cold satisfaction, but she did not let it into her voice. She thought of Emily, watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. So, you are accepting her to Crestwood Academy, Susan stated. It was not a question. Yes, absolutely, Cole said, his voice desperate with false cheer. She is exactly the kind of student we want at Crestwood. A truly brilliant girl. We would be honored to have her. And the fit? Susan asked, and she could not help herself. Yesterday, you were concerned she would not fit in. That she would be more comfortable at her local school. There was a choking sound on the other end. I misspoke, Cole said, his voice shrinking. I was having a difficult day. Stress. It can make one say foolish things. Of course she will fit in. She will be one of our stars. I am very, very sorry for the distress I caused you and your daughter. I was wrong. It was a full apology. A full surrender. Thank you for clarifying, Mr. Cole, Susan said. On behalf of Emily, we accept the scholarship. And we accept her place at your school. Wonderful. Wonderful, he said, relieved. Please, bring her by this morning. We can finalize the paperwork. A fresh start. At, say, 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock, Susan said. We will be there. She hung up the phone without saying goodbye. She turned to her daughter. Emily was standing by the table, her small hands balled into fists at her sides. Mama, Emily whispered. Susan let out the breath she had been holding for 2 days. A slow, wide smile spread across her face. You got it, Emmy, she said, her voice thick with tears. You got the scholarship. You're going to Crestwood. Emily stared at her for a second. The hope in her eyes bloomed into a bright, shining joy. I did, she shrieked. I did. She ran and threw herself into her mother's arms. Susan lifted her off the ground, swinging her around the tiny kitchen. For the first time in a day, the apartment didn't feel small at all. It felt as big as the sky. He said he was wrong, Mama. He said it. Emily laughed. He did, Susan said, setting her down. He said he made a terrible mistake. Emily's joy faded just a little. She looked up at her mother, her bright, 10-year-old mind working. Mama, why did he change his mind? Susan sat down at the table and pulled Emily onto her lap. This was the hard part. Well, sweetie, it's like Daddy said. There was a big mistake. And Daddy made a phone call to help them fix it. He called Mr. Cole? No, not exactly. Daddy? Well, Daddy knows some very important, very good people. People who believe in doing the right thing. And one of them, a very important man, called Mr. Cole. He explained to Mr. Cole that he had made a mistake. He explained that he had been very, very unfair to a wonderful, smart girl. Because he judged us? Emily asked. Yes, baby. Because he judged us, Susan said, smoothing Emily's blonde hair. He looked at my job and he made up his mind. He didn't know anything about us. He didn't know about all your gold stars. And he didn't know? He didn't know about Daddy, Emily finished softly. He didn't know about Daddy, Susan agreed. He didn't know that her father is a hero. And he didn't know that her father and her mother would not let him get away with it. Emily was quiet for a moment, thinking about this. So, Daddy's friend yelled at him. Susan smiled. I don't think he had to yell, honey. Sometimes, when you have a lot of authority, you just have to speak. And people listen. Your father has a lot of authority, even when he's far away. Wow, Emily said. She liked this. It felt like a story from one of her books. The good people had won. The mean man had to say he was sorry. Now, Susan said, standing up. We have to be at that school at 10 o'clock. Let's go put on your blue dress. Okay, Emily said. This time, when she put on the dress, it felt brand new. At Crestwood Academy, Alan Cole was in ruins. He hung up the phone from Susan Hayes. Her cold, dignified acceptance was almost worse than if she had yelled. He knew, in that moment, that he had no power over her at all. He had lost the Harrington donation. He had a military general monitoring his office. And he had been forced to apologize to a housekeeper. The intercom buzzed. It was Miss Janice. Mr. Cole? Mrs. Hayes and her daughter will be here at 10? For the paperwork. Her voice was perfectly professional, but he could hear the smile in it. Yes, Janice, he bit out. Have the founder's scholarship acceptance packet ready. The full packet. Oh, and Mr. Cole, she added. What is it? He snapped. A package just arrived for you. From Washington, D.C. Just put it on my desk, he said. He didn't care. A moment later, Miss Janice came in. She placed a large, thick envelope on his desk. It had no stamp. It had been delivered by a special courier. The return address was a single, stark line. Department of the Army. Miss Janice left, closing the door softly behind her. Cole stared at the envelope. He opened it with a letter opener. His hands were still shaking. Inside, there was no letter. There was only a thick, glossy folder. He opened it. The cover page was a biography. Colonel Michael T. Hayes. He read about the military academy. He read about the advanced degrees. He read about the deployments. He read about the missions, most of which were just black, redacted lines. He read about the medals, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, with 2 oak leaf clusters. He read about the man's current assignment: Senior Strategic Advisor, Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Alan Cole's face turned the color of ash. This was the husband of the woman he had dismissed. This was the father of the child he had called a bad fit. He had not just insulted a housekeeper. He had insulted a decorated war hero, a man who reported directly to the most powerful military leaders in the world. He suddenly, sickeningly, understood. This was not a clerical error. This was a military operation. He had been flanked, cornered, and defeated. And he had never even seen the enemy. He let the file drop to his desk. He looked at the clock. It was 9:30. They would be here in 30 minutes. His panic from yesterday was gone. In its place was a deep, cold, bottomless dread. The second bus ride to Crestwood was different. Emily sat with her back straight, looking out the window. The big houses didn't seem as scary today. They just seemed like houses. She wasn't a small girl asking for a favor. She was a student. She belonged. Susan held her hand, but this time, her grip was relaxed. As they walked up the stone path, the heavy oak doors of the school seemed to open just a little bit easier. When they stepped inside, the main office was not silent. Ms. Janice was at her desk, but she was not alone. Standing beside her desk, looking out the tall window, were two men. They were both in uniform, not the camouflage that Emily had seen in her father's pictures from far away. These were deep, perfect, dark blue uniforms, covered in medals and ribbons. They were crisp, pressed, and powerful. One man was older, with gray hair and stars on his shoulders. He looked like the portraits on the walls, only he was real. The other man turned from the window as the door opened. He was tall and strong. His face was serious, but his eyes were smiling. "Daddy," Emily whispered. Colonel Michael Hayes broke his formal stance and knelt, opening his arms. "Hey, Emmy Bean," he said, his voice thick. Emily let go of her mother's hand and ran. She flew across the polished floor and leaped into her father's arms. He caught her in a hug, so tight it lifted her off the ground. "You're here," she cried into his shoulder. "You're really here. I told you I'd fix it," he whispered, kissing the top of her blonde head. "I had to come see my girl on her first day." Susan walked over, tears streaming down her face. Michael held out one arm and pulled her into the hug. He held his two girls, his family, together in the main office of Crestwood Academy. "I missed you, Mike," Susan whispered. "I missed you more," he said. After a long moment, they parted. Michael stood up, holding Emily's hand. The other man, the general, stepped forward. He had a kind, grandfatherly smile. "You must be Emily," he said, his voice a low, friendly rumble. "I've heard a great deal about you. Are you the one who called?" Emily asked, her voice full of awe. The general laughed. "I am. I'm General Peterson. Your father and I go way back. We couldn't let a little clerical error stand in the way of a brilliant student, now, could we?" "No, sir," Emily said. Just then, the door to the principal's office opened. Alan Cole stood in the doorway. He was pale. His eyes were wide and frantic. He was not looking at Susan or Emily. He was staring at the two uniforms. He was staring at the medals. He was staring at the stars on General Peterson's shoulders. He was staring at the man whose file was sitting on his desk. "Mr. Cole," General Peterson said, his voice no longer grandfatherly. It was the voice of command. "We're here to finalize the paperwork for Emily Hayes." Alan Cole looked at Colonel Hayes. He saw the face from the biography. The war hero. The man he had offended. "Colonel, General," he stammered. I wasn't expecting. Please, come in. All of you." "Thank you, Mr. Cole," Michael said, his voice quiet and cold. He squeezed Emily's hand. "I believe you've already met my wife. And this is my daughter." They walked into the grand office. The room that had felt so large and intimidating yesterday now seemed small, crowded by the presence of the two uniformed men. Alan Cole was a puddle of a man, desperately trying to hold his shape. He was sweating. His face was a sickly, pale gray. His eyes darted from the stars on General Peterson's shoulders to the rows of ribbons on Colonel Hayes's chest, and then to the damning personnel file on his desk. Please sit down," Cole said, gesturing not to the hard-backed chairs of yesterday, but to the expensive leather sofa and armchairs in the corner of his office. Can I get you some coffee? Water?" "We are not here for coffee, Mr. Cole," General Peterson said. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to shake the windows. He did not sit. He stood at ease, his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the portraits of the school's founders. Colonel Hayes did not sit either. He walked, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He moved past the desk and stood next to his wife and daughter, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. He looked at Cole with a calm, analytical coldness. It was the look of a man identifying a target. "You have the paperwork," Michael said. It was not a question. Yes, of course. Cole fumbled, scrambling behind his desk. He knocked over a pen holder. "Right here. The founder's scholarship acceptance forms. A full 4-year award." He held the papers out. Michael did not take them. He nodded to his wife. Susan stepped forward. Her back was straight. Her chin was high. She walked to the magnificent desk that had been used to humiliate her. She looked at Alan Cole, her eyes holding no fear and no pity. She simply held out her hand. Cole, trembling, placed the papers in her hand. The hand he had judged. The hand he had called domestic services. Susan took the papers and a pen. She began to sign them, her script neat and strong. "Mr. Cole," Michael said, his voice quiet, drawing the principal's terrified gaze. Yes, Colonel. I believe you have something to say to my daughter." Cole's eyes snapped to Emily. She was standing tall, her hand holding her father's. She was not smiling. She was just watching him. He was trapped. He knew it. The men in his office were not here to negotiate. They were here to accept his surrender. He swallowed. The sound was loud in the silent room. Yes, of course. He pushed himself away from the desk and walked around it. He stood in front of the 10-year-old girl. He was the most powerful man at Crestwood. She was the daughter of a housekeeper, and he was terrified of her. He tried to bend at the waist, but his back was too stiff. He ended up in a pained, awkward hunch. "Emily," he began, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Emily, I wanted to apologize. To you. I was wrong." Emily just watched him. "I made a terrible error in judgment," he stammered. You are a brilliant student. Crestwood, we are honored to have you. I am very, very sorry for the way I treated you. And your mother. I hope you can accept my apology." Emily looked at him. She saw a small, scared man. The big, fancy office was just a costume. He was not a giant from a storybook. He was just a man who had been mean, and who had been caught. She nodded once. "I accept your apology, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice clear and small, but stronger than his. Cole looked as if he might faint from relief. "Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you." Susan placed the signed papers on his desk. "We are finished here." Yes, of course," Cole said. "School starts on Monday. We will have her uniform and book packet ready. Miss Janice will handle that," Michael said, cutting him off. He put his hand on the small of Susan's back. "Let's go." General Peterson turned from the window. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice a final, sharp warning. "We trust. This will be the end of all clerical errors at this institution. I can assure you, the Department of the Army takes a keen interest in the well-being of its families." "Yes, General. Absolutely, General." "Understood," Cole whispered. Colonel Hayes, Susan, and Emily turned and walked out. General Peterson followed, giving Cole one last look that promised consequences should he ever forget this day. They closed the heavy door behind them, leaving Alan Cole alone in his grand office, a broken man. He sank into his expensive chair, his career in ruins. He had saved a scholarship, but he had lost everything else. In the main office, the air was clear and bright. Miss Janice was at her desk, pretending to type. But her eyes were red, and she was smiling. As the family and the general walked out, she stood up. "Welcome to Crestwood, Emily," she said, her voice warm and genuine. "We are so very happy to have you." Emily let go of her father's hand. She walked to the secretary's desk. She looked at the kind woman who had been the only sunshine in that first, dark visit. "Thank you, Miss Janice," Emily said. She reached into the pocket of her blue dress. I ate the apple. It was very good." Miss Janice's eyes welled with tears. She reached across the desk and briefly squeezed Emily's small hand. "You are welcome, dear," she whispered. "You are very welcome. You're going to do great things here." General Peterson smiled. "See, Mike, I told you this was a good school. Just had one bad apple in charge." He looked at his watch. "Well, I must be on my way. I have a plane to catch. Susan, a pleasure to see you again." and young lady, he said, giving Emily a formal, respectful nod. I expect to see your name at the top of the honor roll. Yes, sir, Emily said, snapping a small, clumsy salute. The general laughed, a big, warm sound. He gave Michael a quick, firm hug. Take care of them, Mike. Always, Mark. Thank you. The general left, and the main doors closed. For a moment, the three of them stood in the quiet, polished hall. It was the first time they had been together as a family in 6 months. So, Michael said, looking down at his daughter. This is a pretty fancy place. It's okay, Emily said, shrugging. It's just a building. Susan and Michael laughed. Come on, Michael said, taking Susan's hand in one of his and Emily's in the other. Let's get out of here. I'm taking my 2 best girls out for lunch. Any place you want. Any place. Emily asked. Any place. Can we get hamburgers? We can get all the hamburgers in the world, Michael said. They pushed open the heavy oak doors together. As they stepped out into the bright morning sunlight, Susan looked back at the gray stone towers of Crestwood Academy. It was not a castle, and it was not a cold, gray box. It was just a school, and her daughter belonged there. 2 days later, they were at the bus station. It was gray and drizzling. Michael was in his civilian clothes again, his bag at his feet. His time was up. Do you have to go, Daddy? Emily asked, holding onto his jacket. I do, Emmy Bean, he said, kneeling. He tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. I have to get back to my job. General Peterson can't have all the fun, can he? Are you going to yell at more principals? She asked. Michael laughed, a short, warm sound. I hope not. That's not really my job. My job is just to make sure good people are safe, so they can do their jobs. Like your mom. Or like you going to school. I love you, Daddy, she whispered, hugging him tight. I love you more, short stuff. Be good. Listen to your mom. And work hard. You earn this. I will, she said. He stood and turned to Susan. They looked at each other, not needing to say all the things they felt. Thank you, Mike, Susan said softly. I could have. I just didn't know how. You did everything right, Susan, he said. He gently took her hands in his. The hands that were red and chapped from work. He turned them over and kissed her palms. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small because of these hands. They've built our life. They've raised our daughter. They are the strongest, most honorable hands I know. Susan cried then, tears of pride and love. I love you, Michael. Come home safe. Always, he said. He kissed her, and then he kissed Emily one last time. He picked up his bag, gave them one last look, and disappeared onto the bus. Susan and Emily stood, waving until the bus turned the corner. Monday morning was bright and clear. Susan walked Emily to the tall, iron gates of Crestwood Academy. Emily was not wearing her blue dress. She was wearing the Crestwood uniform, a dark green plaid skirt, a crisp white shirt, and a green blazer. It fit perfectly. She looked smart. She looked like she belonged. Susan kneeled, just as she had on that first day. All right, Susan said, her voice soft. A new adventure. Are you scared? Emily looked at the big stone building. She saw other children, getting out of fancy cars, all wearing the same uniform. She took a deep breath. A little, she said honestly. But I'm more excited. It's like I said. It's just a building. And you're the smartest girl in it, Susan said, kissing her forehead. Go on. I'll be right here at 3 o'clock to pick you up. Emily nodded. She shouldered her new backpack. She turned to walk away, then hesitated. A few feet away, another girl was standing alone. She, too, had a new-looking uniform. She was nervously twisting a button on her blazer, looking as though she might cry. Emily looked at the girl. She looked at her mother. Susan just smiled, a small, proud nod. Emily walked over to the new girl. Hi, Emily said, her voice clear and kind. My name is Emily. It's my first day, too. The girl looked up, her eyes wide with relief. I'm Jessica, she said. I'm scared. Me too, a little, Emily said. But my dad says it's okay to be scared, as long as you're brave anyway. She held out her hand. Do you want to walk in together? Jessica nodded, a small smile breaking through her fear. She took Emily's hand. Susan watched as her daughter, the housekeeper's daughter, the war hero's daughter, walked through the gates of the grand school. She was not walking in with her head down. She was walking in with her head held high, pulling someone else up with her. She belonged. And that's where we'll end Emily's story for now. Whenever I share one of these, I hope it's a reminder of the quiet strength and dignity found in people like Susan, or the simple, clear-eyed courage of a girl like Emily. It's a story about how easily we can judge by the wrong things, like the roughness of a hand, and miss what truly matters. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe winding down for the evening, or on your daily commute. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We're always trying to improve, so feel free to share your feedback below. Thanks for spending this time with me.